I'm going to use a graph to show how compensation is paid. The horizontal axis will be labeled time, the vertical axis will be labeled income, and the date of injury is at the vertical axis. The graph is not to scale. This is just to give you a general idea of how compensation is paid. You will have to refer to tables or charts to get exact numbers. Before the injury, the employee is receiving his usual wage. If there is no time lost from work due to the injury, then the employee would continue to receive his usual earnings. But if the employee is unable to continue to work due to the injury, he would receive temporary total disability payments up to a maximum allowable weekly earnings, even though he was earning more than the maximum. The payment is 2/3 of earnings. Currently, the maximum earnings is $1,480 per week. This entitles the employee to a payment of $986.69 per week. This is because 2/3 of $1,480 per week is $986.69. It does not matter how much the employee was earning above the maximum. He could have been earning $100,000 per year. The maximum TTD weekly payment is still $986.69. It does not matter also that the employee has a large house payment or a large truck payment. The maximum is still $986.69. TTD payments stop when the primary treating physician declares the employee to be permanent and stationary. Usually an employee will return to work when he becomes permanent and stationary, and temporary total disability payments end. If there is no permanent disability, the employee would receive no further payments. If the employee cannot return to work and is found to be permanently totally disabled or 100%, then he will receive payments for the rest of his life at the temporary total disability payment rate. Permanent total disability payments do not increase indefinitely. Earnings before the injury were at this line. Below that is a line for 2/3 of the earnings. Usually the employee doesn't get 2/3 of the earnings. This is because the maximum allowable earnings is usually below that of actual earnings. The maximum allowable earnings has cost of living increases. Therefore 2/3 of the maximum, or the maximum payment, also has increases. At some point, the maximum payment becomes higher than 2/3 of the earnings. At that point, the payments no longer increase. So the payment would look like the blue line. At first, it has COLA increases, but then it would max out at the green 2/3 earnings line and no longer have increases. But if permanent disability is less than total, the employee would begin receiving permanent partial disability payments. He would receive these payments whether or not he returned to work. The payments are not permanent. It is the disability that is permanent. These payments end, and they end whether or not the employee has returned to work. Permanent partial disability payments are paid at a lower rate than permanent total disability payments. If the permanent disability rating were between 1 and 69%, the maximum allowable weekly earnings is $345. That is about $8.63 per hour. The weekly payment to the employee is 2/3 of the maximum weekly earnings, so 2/3 of $345 is $230. So the maximum weekly payment is $230. No matter how much an employee earns above the maximum, the payment is still limited to $230 per week. PD is paid for a specified number of weeks. The number of weeks depends on the rating. When all of the weeks of PD have been paid out, PD payments end. The employee receives no more payments. PD payments stop whether the employee has returned to work or not. How long is PD paid? PD can be for as little as 3 weeks for 1%, or as long as at $423.25 weeks at 69%. That's over 8 years. Now let's look at when the rating percentage is 70% or more but less than 100%. The weekly payment is at a higher rate because the maximum allowable weekly earnings increases to $405 per week. So the maximum PD payment rate increases to $270 per week. That's 2/3 times $405 is $270. The number of weeks of payout for PD increases and can be as high as 897.25 weeks for a 99% rating. That's over 17 years. When the weeks of payment have been paid out, then the PD benefit ends. There is an additional benefit when the rating is between 70 and 99%. In addition to the permanent disability payments, the employee would receive a pension for the rest of his life. The pension does not start until the weeks of permanent disability have been paid. For this video, we only considered what payments are made directly to the injured employee. Medical treatment is an important benefit that is to be provided by the employer, but payments for treatment are not paid to the employee. Payments for medical treatment are made directly to the medical provider.